Ma'am, you're being detained. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Now.
Officer, you have no lawful basis to detain me. Standing here is not a crime.
You're refusing a lawful order. That's obstruction.
No, that's the Constitution, and you're violating it on camera.
I said turn around.
You're about to regret this.
The body camera footage would eventually be played in a silent, stunned federal courtroom showing every minute of the disaster in high definition. But on that bright, crisp Tuesday afternoon, Officer Kyle Braden had absolutely no idea that the woman he was watching, the woman he had already decided was a problem, was practically royalty in the world of municipal ethics. He sat in his patrol unit, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the heat of the midday sun. He adjusted his sunglasses, staring through the windshield at the figure standing near the entrance of the newly renovated City Hall Plaza. To Braden, a 29-year-old officer with a history of aggressive, proactive policing, the woman looked out of place. She was standing too still. She was looking at the architectural details of the plaza with an intensity that Braden interpreted as casing the joint. She was a black woman, 58 years old, dressed in a tailored cream-colored suit that cost more than Braden's first car, though he didn't recognize the brand. She wasn't rushing to a meeting. She wasn't eating lunch on a bench. She was just standing there examining the gradient of the wheelchair ramp. Her name was Dr. Vivian Moore. She held a Ph.D. in public policy and had spent the last 30 years tearing down corrupt institutions and rebuilding them with ironclad oversight. She was currently the chair of the City Ethics Commission. She was the woman who signed off on the budget for the very plaza she was standing in. She was there for a specific reason. She had received a tip that the contractors had cut corners on the ADA compliance ramps to save money, and Vivian Moore didn't trust reports. She trusted her own eyes. She moved a few steps to the left, testing the railing for stability. To Officer Braden, this looked like loitering. It looked like someone testing the security. It looked like suspicious activity in a high-security government zone. Braden had been on the force for 6 years, and he had developed an arrogance that often masquerades as intuition. He believed he could spot a criminal by their body language. He didn't see a dignitary ensuring the safety of disabled citizens. He saw a woman who didn't belong, lingering where she shouldn't be. Before we go any further into this story, a story that will make your blood boil and then make you cheer for justice, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who out there believes that respect is a two-way street. And if you believe that the badge should stand for protection, not intimidation, hit that subscribe button. You are not going to want to miss how this unfolds. Braden checked his computer. No calls pending. He was free to engage. He put the cruiser in park, but he didn't call it in yet. He wanted to get a read on her first. He watched her crouch down slightly to look at the joint where the concrete met the pavement. In his mind, she was looking for a place to stash something, or maybe checking for security sensors. It was a leap of logic so profound it defied physics, but Braden was already writing the narrative in his head. He opened his car door and stepped out into the heat. The heavy thud of his boots on the pavement was the first sound of a career ending, though he didn't hear it yet. Vivian stood up and brushed invisible dust from her slacks. She took a notebook from her purse and made a quick note. She was calm. She was in her element. She owned this plaza in a way Braden couldn't comprehend. She had fought the city council for 3 years to get the funding for this renovation. She wasn't just a visitor. She was the architect of the policy that built it. Braden approached her from the side, his hand resting near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to signal dominance. He didn't say good afternoon. He didn't ask if she needed help. He went straight to the command voice he had practiced in the mirror. "Ma'am, stop right there." Vivian stopped writing. She didn't jump. She didn't flinch. She simply turned her head, her glasses catching the reflection of the sun, and looked at him. She saw a young man barely 30 with a high and tight haircut and a posture that screamed conflict. She closed her notebook slowly. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had lectured in auditoriums with 500 seats. It was projected clear and utterly devoid of fear.
I need to know what you're doing here, Braden said, stepping into her personal space. You've been standing in this one spot for 15 minutes. We've had reports of loitering in this area. There were no reports. Braden was lying. It was a tactic he used to flush out nervousness. But Vivian Moore didn't get nervous. She got analytical. I am inspecting the construction, Vivian said calmly. And I haven't been here 15 minutes, officer. I've been here for 6, and standing in a public plaza during business hours is not loitering. Braden didn't like that. He didn't like being corrected. He especially didn't like being corrected by a black woman who looked him directly in the eye. The dynamic was wrong. He was the law. She was the subject. She was supposed to be apologetic. She was supposed to be scrambling for an excuse. It is if you have no lawful business here, Braden snapped. This is a government facility. We have security concerns. You checking out the security features? Vivian almost laughed. It was absurd. I am checking the ADA compliance of the grade. It appears the slope is 3 degrees too steep. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more measurements to verify. She turned back to the ramp. It was a dismissal. She treated him like a confused intern, not a threat. And that was when Braden decided this wasn't just a stop anymore. It was a contest of wills. And he had the handcuffs. I didn't say you could turn away from me, Braden said, his voice rising. The lunch crowd was starting to filter out of the nearby office buildings. People were grabbing sandwiches, walking to the park benches. They saw a uniformed officer berating a well-dressed woman. Heads started to turn. I am initiating an investigation, Braden announced, moving to block her path. You are now detained for suspicion of loitering and prowling. I need your identification, now. Vivian sighed. It was a sigh of deep, exhaustion-filled disappointment. She knew exactly where this was going. She knew the statutes better than he did. She had in fact been part of the committee that revised the city's loitering laws 2 years ago to prevent exactly this kind of harassment. Officer, she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. You are making a mistake. Under Brown v. Texas and under our state's specific statutes, you cannot demand identification without reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be committed. Standing in a public plaza is not a crime. Inspecting public infrastructure is not a crime. I am not obligated to provide ID. Braden's face flushed red. He felt the eyes of the civilians on him. He felt his authority slipping away. He couldn't let a civilian quote case law to him. You're refusing a lawful order, Braden asked, his hand dropping to his radio. That's obstruction. That's resisting. It is neither, Vivian said. It is the exercise of my Fourth Amendment rights. I am asking you to articulate the crime. Specifically, what statute am I violating? Loitering, Braden said, grasping at straws. Section 647. Section 647 requires an intent to commit a crime. Vivian recited from memory. It also requires you to offer the subject an opportunity to explain their presence, which I have done. I am inspecting the plaza. My presence is lawful. Therefore, no loitering exists. You have no basis to detain me. Am I free to go? No, you are not free to go, Braden barked. You're detained until I figure out who you are. And since you're refusing to identify yourself, you're now hindering an investigation. A small crowd had formed. A paralegal from the city attorney's office, eating a salad on a nearby bench, paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. She recognized Dr. Moore. Her eyes went wide. She slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She hit record. Sir, Vivian said, shifting her stance to face him fully. I am going to give you an opportunity to de-escalate this. I am going to reach into my purse and show you my credentials. They will explain who I am and why I am here. I am not reaching for a weapon. I am reaching for my wallet. Don't you dig in that purse, Braden warned, though he didn't draw his weapon. He was confused now. Her confidence was unshakable. I am moving slowly, Vivian narrated, moving her hand with deliberate, non-threatening slowness. She opened her leather tote. She pulled out a leather wallet with a gold badge embossed on the front. It wasn't a police badge, but it carried the seal of the City Ethics Commission. She held it up. "My name is Dr. Vivian Moore. I am the chair of the Ethics Commission. I have jurisdiction over municipal code compliance. I am working." Braden looked at the badge. He saw the word Commissioner. He saw the city seal. But his brain, poisoned by bias and adrenaline, rejected the data. It didn't fit the pattern. People like her didn't have badges like that. "That looks fake," Braden said. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. "You can buy those online." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "I assure you, officer, it is real. You can call the city manager's office. You can call the mayor's office. They will confirm my identity." "I'm not calling the mayor for a loiterer with a fake badge," Braden sneered. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, send me a second unit to City Hall Plaza. I have a non-compliant subject refusing to identify, flashing false credentials. Possible 148. Code 148. Resisting, delaying, obstructing an officer." Vivian lowered the badge. She looked at the young man with a mixture of pity and resolve. "You have just escalated a consensual encounter into an unlawful arrest based on a protected activity. You are digging a hole, officer, and you have no idea how deep it goes." "Turn around," Braden ordered. "Put your hands behind your back." "For what?" "Disorderly conduct, failure to obey, possessing false government identification. Take your pick," Braden said, feeling the rush of power return. He was taking control. He was winning. Vivian handed her purse to a bystander, the paralegal, who was filming. "Hold this, please," Vivian said to the stranger. "Do not stop recording." "I won't," the paralegal said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know who you are, Dr. Moore." Braden ignored the bystander. He spun Vivian around. She didn't fight. She allowed him to pull her arms back. The clicking sound of the handcuffs was loud in the quiet plaza. "This is an unlawful arrest," Vivian stated clearly for the camera. "I am not resisting. I am complying under duress. This officer has refused to verify my identity through proper channels and is arresting me without probable cause." Braden tightened the cuffs. He checked them, not too gentle, not too rough, just standard. But on a 58-year-old woman in a business suit, standard looked brutal. He marched her toward his patrol car. "Watch your head," he said, pushing her down into the back seat. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving. The smell of the patrol car, stale coffee, and sanitizer filled her nose. Vivian sat up straight despite her hands being pinned behind her. She watched through the plexiglass as Braden got into the front seat. He was pumped up. He was typing on his computer. He felt like he had taken down a sovereign citizen or a fraudster. He had no idea that the phone calls were already starting. The paralegal had already called her boss at the city attorney's office. Braden drove the 12 minutes to the precinct in silence. He glanced in the rearview mirror a few times, expecting her to be crying or begging or screaming. That's what people usually did when the reality of jail set in. But Vivian Moore just looked out the window, watching the city she served pass by. She was already drafting the subpoena list in her mind. They pulled into the sally port of the downtown precinct. The heavy metal doors rolled down behind them. Braden pulled Vivian out of the car. She stood tall, her shoulders back despite the cuffs. He walked her into the processing area. The booking desk was manned by Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 55 years old, a career cop who had seen it all. He was 2 years away from retirement and just wanted a quiet shift. He was drinking a diet soda and looking at a roster when the door opened. "What do we have, Braden?" Miller asked, not looking up yet. "Refusal to ID loitering at City Hall, possession of fake credentials," Braden said proudly. "She claims she's some kind of commissioner." Miller looked up. He looked at the woman in the cream suit. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at her face. Miller dropped his soda. It hit the desk with a loud clatter, spilling foam over his paperwork, but he didn't notice.
His face went pale, draining of color instantly. He knew exactly who Vivian Moore was. He had testified before her commission 3 months ago regarding overtime fraud in the department. She had grilled him for 2 hours. She was the most powerful civilian in the city's oversight structure. "Oh my God," Miller whispered. He ran around the desk. He didn't walk. He ran. "Braden, are you out of your mind?" Miller hissed. "Do you know who this is?" "She's a loiterer with a fake badge," Braden said, confused by the sergeant's reaction. "That is Dr. Vivian Moore," Miller shouted. "She is the chair of the Ethics Commission. She holds the purse strings for the Legal Defense Fund. She signs off on the chief's discretionary budget." Braden felt the blood leave his head. His knees felt weak. She refused to show ID. "She doesn't have to show you jack squat if she's not committing a crime," Miller yelled. He turned to Vivian. "Dr. Moore, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I'm going to get these off you right now." Miller reached for his keys. "No," Vivian said. Her voice was ice. "Do not touch me." Miller froze. "Ma'am, please, let me get these off." "Officer Braden put them on," Vivian said. "Officer Braden can take them off. But not yet. I want the chief of police down here. I want him to see me like this. I want him to see exactly how his officers treat citizens when they think nobody is watching. Dr. Moore, the chief, is in a meeting." "Pull him out," Vivian commanded, "or I will call the mayor from this booking phone and have him come down here." Miller looked at Braden. Braden looked like a ghost. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. He looked like a child who had just realized he broke the most expensive vase in the house. "Call the chief," Miller ordered the desk clerk. "Now tell him it's a code red. Tell him Dr. Moore is in cuffs and booking." For 20 minutes, nobody moved. Vivian stood in the center of the room. Other officers walked through, saw who it was, and quickly walked away, terrified of being associated with the scene. Braden stood in the corner, trying to make himself invisible. He replayed the interaction in his head. "The badge. She showed me the badge. I called it fake." The doors burst open. Chief of Police Robert Henderson stormed in. He wasn't wearing his jacket. He looked frantic. He saw Vivian. He saw the cuffs. He closed his eyes for a second, a look of pure pain on his face. "Uncuff her," Henderson said, his voice low and dangerous. "Right. Now." Braden stepped forward, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key in the lock. He clicked the cuffs open. Vivian rubbed her wrists. There were red marks on her skin. "Dr. Moore," the chief said, stepping forward. "I don't even know where to begin." "You can begin," Vivian said, massaging her wrist, "by explaining to me why your officer believes that a black woman standing at City Hall must be a criminal. You can explain why loitering is still being used as a catch-all for I don't like how you look. And you can explain why he refused to look at my credentials." She turned to Braden. He couldn't meet her eyes. "You have a lot of power, officer," she said softly. "You have the power to take away freedom. Today you used it because your ego was threatened. You didn't investigate. You assumed. And that is dangerous." "You're free to go, Dr. Moore," the chief said. "We will handle this internally. Immediately." "Oh, I'm sure you will," Vivian said. "But I will also be handling it externally." She didn't ask for a ride home. She called her husband. When she walked out of the station, the paralegal was waiting for her with her purse. "I got it all," the paralegal said. "Every second." "Send it to me," Vivian said. "And send it to the ACLU." The investigation that followed was swift and brutal, but it wasn't just about the video. It was about the data. Vivian Moore knew how to look for patterns. She subpoenaed Braden's entire arrest record. It turned out Braden had a habit. He liked to patrol the high-end shopping districts and the government center. Over the last 2 years, he had stopped 42 people for loitering. 38 of them were black or Latino. None of them were ever charged with a secondary crime. He was using the statute to clear undesirables from wealthy areas. He was a cleaner, and nobody had stopped him because his arrest stats looked proactive. But you can't clean the chair of the Ethics Commission. The video went public 3 days later. It was everywhere. The sight of the dignified, calm woman being handcuffed by the aggressive, sneering young officer was visceral. The audio of him calling her credentials fake was the nail in the coffin. It became a national talking point about the difference between policing and harassment. Braden was placed on administrative leave, but it didn't last long. The internal affairs investigation monitored closely by Vivian's office found him guilty of false arrest, racial profiling, and conduct unbecoming. He was fired 4 weeks after the incident. He tried to appeal through the union, but the union rep watched. The video looked at the chief and said, "We can't defend this." The city settled with Dr. Moore for $850,000. It was a massive sum for a wrongful arrest with no physical injury, but the city attorney knew that if Vivian Moore took them to trial, she would put the entire police department on the stand. She would dismantle them piece by piece. They paid to make it stop. Vivian didn't keep a dime. She created the Moore Justice Grant, a fund dedicated to providing legal representation for indigent citizens accused of loitering and nuisance crimes. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It was the Moore Doctrine. The city council passed a new ordinance drafted by Vivian herself. It strictly defined loitering to require proof of criminal intent before detention. It required officers to accept digital and physical credentials from city employees immediately, and it mandated that any officer with more than 3 unsubstantiated loitering stops in a month be pulled from patrol for retraining. Officer Kyle Braden left the state. He couldn't get a job in security, let alone law enforcement. His name was toxic. The last anyone heard, he was working in a warehouse in Nevada, far away from the public eye. Dr. Vivian Moore is still on the Ethics Commission. She still inspects construction sites. But now, when officers see her, they don't see a loiterer. They see the woman who taught them that the badge is a heavy weight to carry, and if you use it as a weapon against the innocent, it will eventually crush you. Have you ever been judged by your appearance in a way that cost you your freedom or dignity? Or have you seen it happen to someone else? I want to hear your stories in the comments. And do you think the punishment for Officer Braden was enough? Should he have faced criminal charges for false imprisonment? Let's talk about it. This story matters because it shows us the fragility of our rights. Dr. Moore survived this and triumphed because she was Dr. Moore. She had the knowledge, the connections, and the status to fight back. But imagine if she had been a janitor. Imagine if she had been a teacher. Imagine if she had been just a grandmother waiting for a bus. Would the sergeant have run around the desk? Would the chief have come down, or would she have sat in a cell for 24 hours? Pleaded out to a misdemeanor to go home and carried a criminal record for the rest of her life? That is the question that keeps Vivian Moore up at night. And it should keep us up too, because justice shouldn't depend on who you know or what title is on your business card. It should be blind. And until it is, we have to keep watching, keep recording, and keep holding them accountable. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please share it. It helps the channel, but more importantly, it helps spread the truth. I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there.
Hands up! Don't touch that vest! What are you wearing? Body armor?
It's a weighted vest. I'm jogging. I'm unarmed.
Turn around, now! That device on your wrist, what is it?
It's a GPS watch. Officer, you have no legal basis to detain me.
I decide what's legal.
Officer Derek Vance had been wearing the badge of the Oak Creek Police Department for just 3 years. But he carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed the law was something he enforced, not something he was bound by. He was 28 years old, physically imposing, and aggressively ambitious, a combination that had already garnered him a reputation among his peers as a hard charger. police slang for an officer who went looking for trouble rather than waiting for it to be reported. But that Tuesday morning, under the crisp golden light of a breaking dawn, Vance wasn't just looking for trouble. He was about to manufacture a catastrophe that would cost his city $4.5 million and dismantle his own life in the process. He was patrolling the winding, tree-lined streets of King's Crossing, an affluent suburb known for its manicured lawns, six-figure incomes, and a populace that preferred their neighborhood watch reports to remain silent. Vance liked patrolling here. It felt orderly. It felt like the kind of place that needed protecting from the outside elements he was always so vigilant against. Meanwhile, 3 streets over, Marcus Thorne was checking the straps on his vest. At 46 years old, Thorne was a creature of intense discipline. He stood 6'2" with the lean, hardened physique of a man who refused to let middle age soften him. He worked as a senior intelligence analyst for the Department of Homeland Security, a role that required him to sift through the darkest corners of international terror networks and domestic threats. His clearance level was so high that his personnel file was redacted even from most local law enforcement databases. To handle the stress of a job where a single missed detail could result in a national tragedy, Thorne ran. Every morning, rain or shine, he strapped on a 20-pound tactical weighted vest, a common fitness tool designed to increase endurance, and ran 5 miles. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He wasn't carrying drugs. He was carrying the weight of his own commitment to physical excellence. Thorne adjusted the wrist-mounted GPS monitor on his left arm, tapped the start button, and began his rhythm. Left, right, breathe. The morning air was cool, the sky a bruised purple turning to gold. He loved this time of day. It was the only time the world made sense before the briefing books and the threat assessments and the bureaucratic red tape of Washington, D.C. took over his mind. He ran with a smooth, efficient gait, his breath pluming in the chill air. He wore black compression gear under the sand-colored vest, looking every bit the operator he trained to be, though his battlefield was data and strategy. He had lived in King's Crossing for 4 years, a quiet neighbor who paid his taxes early and kept his lawn pristine. But to the eyes watching him from behind the blinds of 412 Maple Drive, Marcus Thorne wasn't a neighbor. He was a threat. Eleanor Hunsacker, a 62-year-old retiree whose primary hobby had become monitoring the neighborhood Facebook page for suspicious activity, was already on her second cup of coffee. She peered through the slats of her plantation shutters, her eyes narrowing as she saw the large black man jogging down the street. In her mind, the narrative twisted instantly. She didn't see a fitness enthusiast in a weighted vest. She saw a paramilitary soldier. She saw a suicide bomber. She saw something out of a movie, something that didn't belong in King's Crossing. The vest looked bulky to her untrained eye. The GPS monitor on his wrist looked like a detonator. Panic, fueled by hours of cable news and an isolated worldview, seized her. She didn't pause to think. She didn't wait to see if he would just jog past, which he did. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher asked, her voice calm and practiced. Eleanor's voice was high-pitched, trembling with a manufactured terror. Yes, I need police immediately at King's Crossing. There's a man, a very large man, running down the street. He's wearing body armor, like military armor, and he has some kind of device strapped to his arm. I think he might be casing the houses, or I don't know, he looks like he's preparing for an attack. The dispatcher paused, typing rapidly. Ma'am, is he holding a weapon? Is he threatening anyone? Eleanor hesitated, peering out the window again as Thorne disappeared around the corner. He looks threatening just being here. He's wearing a bulletproof vest. Why would anyone wear that if they weren't planning a shootout? You need to send someone before he hurts someone. The call went out over the radio, filtered through the adrenaline of the dispatch room. Unit 4 Alpha, proceed to King's Crossing. Suspicious subject, black male, heavy build, reportedly wearing tactical body armor and operating electronic devices. Caller states subject may be armed or casing residences.
Officer Derek Vance heard the code, and his spine straightened. Tactical body armor. In his mind, the script was already written. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an active threat. He flipped on his lights, not the siren wanting the element of surprise. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He had been waiting for a real call all week, something to break the monotony of noise complaints and traffic stops. He sped toward King's Crossing, his mind already categorizing the man he hadn't yet met as a combatant. He didn't consider that CrossFitters wore vests. He didn't consider that federal agents lived in the area. He considered only the danger and the glory of stopping it. Thorne had finished the loop and was cooling down near the entrance of the subdivision, a small community park with a few benches and a duck pond. He checked his heart rate on the GPS 145 beats per minute. Good. He walked slowly, hands on his hips, letting his breathing return to normal. He was thinking about the briefing he had at 10:00 a.m. regarding a potential cyber threat in the energy sector. He was completely absorbed in his thoughts when the peace of the morning was shattered. Officer Vance's cruiser roared over the curb tires, chewing up the grass, and screeched to a halt just 10 feet from where Thorne stood. Thorne didn't run. He didn't flinch. He simply stopped walking and turned to face the vehicle, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than fear. This was his first mistake in the eyes of Officer Vance. Vance burst out of the car, hand already resting on the grip of his service weapon, his stance wide and aggressive. "Let me see your hands. Get your hands up now." Vance screamed, his voice cracking with intensity. Thorne, maintaining the composure that had allowed him to brief the cabinet without sweating, slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms open. "Officer!" Thorne set his voice a deep resonant baritone that carried authority. "I am unarmed. I am exercising. There is no need for this aggression." "I said, get them up higher." Vance advanced, closing the distance. "Turn around. Face away from me." Thorne complied slowly, his movements deliberate. He knew the drill. He knew that any sudden movement could be interpreted as a reach. "Officer," Thorne repeated, facing the pond now. "I am a federal employee. I live in this neighborhood. My identification is in my vehicle, which is parked about 50 yards down the road at the trailhead." Vance wasn't listening. He was scanning the vest. "What are you wearing? Is that body armor? Why are you wearing body armor in a residential neighborhood?" "It is a weighted fitness vest," Thorne explained, his patience already being tested. "It weighs 20 pounds. It is for resistance training. It is not ballistic armor." Vance snorted, stepping closer, his adrenaline clouding his judgment. "Looks like tactical gear to me. And what's that on your wrist, detonator scanner?" Thorne turned his head slightly, just enough to make eye contact over his shoulder. "It is a Garmin GPS watch. It tracks my heart rate and mileage. Officer, I am going to lower my hands slowly to turn off the timer." "Don't you move," Vance shouted, drawing his taser now. "You don't touch anything until I tell you to. You're detained for suspicious conduct and loitering." Thorne stiffened. "Loitering? I am standing in a public park in a neighborhood where I own a home. I am not loitering. And suspicious conduct is not a crime unless you can articulate a specific felony or misdemeanor I am about to commit." Vance hated this. He hated when they knew the law. It felt like a challenge to his authority. "You're detained because I said so. I got a call about a man in tactical gear threatening residents. Now do you have ID on you?" "As I stated." Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "My wallet is in my car. However, I can provide you with my badge number and my agency clearance code. I am a senior analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. If you run my name Marcus Thorne, you will see my status." Vance laughed, a short, nervous bark. "Homeland Security." "Yeah, and I'm the director of the FBI. You think I haven't heard every story in the book? You're wearing a tactical vest at 6:00 a.m., prowling around expensive houses. You're coming downtown until we figure out who you really are." "I am not going anywhere with you." Thorne said firmly. I have identified myself. I have explained my presence. Unless you are placing me under arrest for a specific crime, I am free to go. That is the Fourth Amendment, officer. You need reasonable suspicion to detain and probable cause to arrest. You have neither. This was the tipping point. For Vance, this wasn't about the law anymore. It was about respect. He felt small in front of this large, articulate man who didn't seem afraid of his badge. He holstered the taser and grabbed Thorne's wrist. Okay, have it your way. You're under arrest for failure to identify and resisting an officer. Thorne didn't pull away, but he didn't make it easy. He planted his feet. I did not fail to identify. I gave you my name and occupation. You refused to verify it. This is an unlawful arrest. Vance didn't care. He kicked Thorne's legs apart, forcing the larger man off balance. He slammed Thorne against the hood of the cruiser, the heat of the engine radiating through the metal. Stop resisting. Vance yelled for the benefit of the body camera, even though Thorne was standing perfectly still. Vance wrenched Thorne's arms behind his back. The angle was bad. Thorne's shoulders screamed in protest. Officer, be advised, Thorne said through gritted teeth. You are assaulting a federal officer. You are making a career-ending mistake. Shut up. Vance clicked the handcuffs on. He made them tight, punishingly tight. The metal bit into the soft tissue of Thorne's wrists. Vance shoved him roughly toward the back door of the squad car. Thorne stumbled, but caught himself. He looked at Vance, really looked at him, memorizing the badge number 4922. Vance. Officer Vance. Thorne said, his voice eerily calm now. Check the front pocket of the vest. There is a pouch. My emergency medical card is there. It lists my blood type and my agency contact. Check it. I'm not checking anything you tell me to, Vance spat. He shoved Thorne into the back seat and slammed the door. The cage was cramped. Thorne sat awkwardly, the weighted vest pressing into his spine, the handcuffs cutting off circulation. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He began to mentally draft the lawsuit. He cataloged the time, 6:18 a.m. He cataloged the offenses. Unlawful seizure, excessive force, battery deprivation of rights under color of law. He wouldn't just sue the city. He would ensure this officer never carried a badge again. Vance got into the front seat, breathing heavy, feeling the rush of the bust. He grabbed the radio. Dispatch 4 Alpha, 1 in custody. Male suspect was uncooperative, resisted arrest, transporting to station for processing. He felt proud. He had caught the guy in the tactical vest. He was protecting the neighborhood. Suddenly another cruiser pulled up alongside them. It was Sergeant Miller. Miller was 52, a man with graying temples and a waistline that spoke of too many years sitting in a car and eating on the go. But Miller was a good cop, a careful cop. He had heard the radio traffic, and something about Vance's tone hadn't sat right with him. He rolled down his window. Vance rolled down his. What do you have, Vance? Miller asked, squinting at the suspect in the back seat. He saw a man in expensive athletic gear, not a burglar's hoodie. He saw the expensive GPS watch. He saw the composure. Suspicious character, Sarge, Vance said, pumped up. Wearing body armor. Refused to ID, resisted arrest. Neighbor said he was casing houses. Miller looked at Thorne. Thorne looked back. Thorne didn't look like a thug. He looked like management. Miller got out of his car and walked over to the back window of Vance's cruiser. He tapped on the glass. Vance rolled it down. Morning, Miller said cautiously. Sergeant, Thorne said. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a GS-15 senior analyst with the Department of Homeland Security. My clearance code is Alpha 7 Yankee 9. I was jogging. I offered this officer my credentials verbally and directed him to my wallet in my car. He refused, assaulted me, and arrested me without cause. I am requesting you contact the DHS watch desk immediately. The number is 202-282-8000. Ask for the duty officer. Miller froze. He knew that tone. That wasn't the tone of a criminal trying to bluff. That was the tone of a man who gave orders to people who gave orders to Miller. And GS-15. That was the civilian equivalent of a colonel or a general. Miller looked at Vance. Vance was smirking, shaking his head. "Guy's full of it, Sarge. He's just throwing out jargon." "Vance," Miller said, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you check his wallet?" "He said it was in his car. I didn't leave the scene." "Did you check the vest?" "No." Miller swore under his breath. He turned back to Thorne. "Stay tight, sir." Miller walked back to his cruiser and grabbed the radio mic.
He didn't use the main channel. He switched to the secure channel used for sensitive checks. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Miller. Need a priority check on a name. Thorne, Marcus, Thorne. Possible federal affiliation." The wait was 30 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Vance was tapping his steering wheel, impatient. Miller was watching the dashboard, a pit forming in his stomach. The radio crackled. "Sergeant Miller?" The dispatcher's voice was different now, tense, urgent. "I have a Priority 1 flag on that subject. DHS active status. Top secret /SCI clearance. The system is flashing a do not detain warning without direct authorization from the Attorney General's office. We have a call coming in on the landline from the DHS field office in Seattle. They want to know why their analyst's panic beacon just triggered." Miller felt the blood drain from his face. The GPS watch. It wasn't just a tracker. It was a safety device for high-value assets. Thorne had triggered a silent alarm when he was handcuffed. Miller walked back to Vance's car. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Vance," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Get him out. Now. What, Sarge, I'm telling you. Get him out of the car and take those cuffs off immediately. You just arrested a Homeland Security analyst with top-level clearance. Washington is on the phone. You verify Vance. You always verify." Vance looked at Miller, then back at Thorne. The smirk vanished. The arrogance crumbled into a sudden, sickening realization. He opened the door. He unlocked the cuffs. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped the key once. Thorne stepped out of the car. He didn't rub his wrists immediately. He stood to his full height, adjusting his vest. He looked at Vance, who was staring at the ground, unable to meet his eyes. Thorne's silence was louder than any scream. He looked at Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant," Thorne said, "I want your body camera footage secured. I want his body camera footage secured. I want the dispatch logs preserved. And I want the name of the caller who reported me." "Yes, sir," Miller said. "Sir, I apologize on behalf of—" "Save it for the deposition," Thorne said. "I am going to finish my run. My car is at the trailhead. I expect you to follow me there so I can retrieve my physical ID, which you will then document to close this file. And then I am going to make a phone call that will change the leadership of this department." Thorne turned and jogged away, his pace steady, his form perfect. Vance stood by his cruiser, watching the man disappear into the morning mist. He knew with a terrifying certainty that his life as he knew it was over. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The body camera footage was released 3 weeks later after the internal investigation concluded. It went viral within hours. The image of Officer Vance, aggressive and sneering, manhandling a calm, compliant black federal agent, became the lead story on every national news network. The contrast was impossible to ignore the professional dignity of Thorne versus the insecure bullying of Vance. The lawsuit filed by Marcus Thorne was a masterclass in civil rights litigation. It didn't just target Vance. It targeted the training protocols of the Oak Creek Police Department. It exposed a pattern of pretextual stops in the department where officers were encouraged to find reasons to stop outsiders in affluent neighborhoods. The city attorney took one look at the evidence, the video, and the federal pressure coming from DHS and advised the city council to settle immediately, $4.5 million. That was the check the city wrote to Marcus Thorne. But the money wasn't the point. Derek Vance was fired 2 months after the incident. He was stripped of his certification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The neighbor Eleanor Hunsaker was named in a civil defamation suit and faced public shaming that forced her to move out of King's Crossing within the year. But as the dust settled, the victory felt hollow. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne was back on his morning run. It was another beautiful dawn. He wore the same vest. He ran the same path. But as he ran, he found himself checking over his shoulder every time a car passed. He found himself scanning for uniforms, his heart rate spiking not from exertion, but from memory. He realized that no amount of money, no badge, and no clearance level could buy back the feeling of safety he had lost. He was a high-ranking official in the United States government, charged with protecting the homeland, yet he couldn't even protect himself from the bias of a man sworn to serve him. The system had worked eventually, but only because Thorne had the power to force it to work. What if he had been a school teacher, a mechanic, a nurse? That was the question that haunted him as he ran through the quiet streets. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Why is reasonable suspicion so often based on who fits a visual profile rather than actual behavior? Why do we allow officers like Vance to remain on the force until they cost taxpayers millions? And most importantly, how many Marcus Thornes are there who don't have a badge to save them? Where are you watching from today? Do you think officers should be personally liable for settlements when they violate civil rights? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe stories like this need to be told to hold power accountable, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. Together, we can shine a light on the truth. Until next time, stay safe and know your rights. The end.